es. Ok, bueno, buenas tardes. Estamos dando inicio al segundo módulo del seminario. Este segundo módulo va a estar íntegramente a cargo del profesor Jari Lavonen. Un inmenso placer para mí presentarlo. Jari es un colega de la Universidad de Helsinki, un gran referente, o diría el referente en Finlandia, respecto de formación docente. Jari tiene 158 libros publicados y más de 300 artículos en revistas científicas. Insisto en que es un referente de los más importantes de Finlandia en formación docente, muy respetado en la academia y muy respetado por el colectivo de los maestros y profesores. Actualmente es presidente del Foro de Formación Docente de Finlandia, ha sido por 2 periodos decano de la Facultad de Educación de la Universidad de Helsinki y tiene una gran trayectoria internacional. Pero fundamentalmente quiero rescatar de Jari que es un colega que tiene una gran generosidad con el conocimiento y la experiencia que él posee para poder compartirla y para poder llevarla adelante. Creo que es un ejemplo en este sentido para todos nosotros, para poder copiar un poquito de esa humildad académica y de esa tolerancia, de ese deseo de compartir, ¿no? Jari está a cargo de este segundo módulo. Este segundo módulo va a estar más focalizado en cuestiones vinculadas a las metodologías, distintas metodologías de aproximación a la perspectiva STEAM y algunas conceptualizaciones. La intención de cómo se organizó este segundo módulo es cerrar el seminario de posgrado que inició con presentación de experiencias locales desarrolladas en relación a políticas educativas que alcanzan las escuelas en el territorio de la ciudad de Helsinki y de una experiencia muy particular desarrollada a través de los centros Luma, en ese modelo de integración que trae y vincula a la sociedad al sistema escolar, ¿no? Terminado, quiero referir a algunas cuestiones vinculadas al seminario. Tenemos el aula abierta para toda la información, con todas las grabaciones y los documentos, los slides utilizados en la primera semana. Para esta segunda semana va a ser lo mismo. En el día de hoy, en el break que hagamos, Jari va a necesitar que se complete un formulario que estamos subiendo al aula en este momento. Ya está bien, porque él lo necesita trabajar sobre la base de sus respuestas esta noche. Tendrá que continuar ya llegando a las 35 horas seguidas desde que despegó de Finlandia sin parar, pero necesita trabajar esas respuestas de ustedes, por lo que les pedimos encarecidamente que las completen. Él dice que no toma más de 10 minutos o 15 minutos, porque él necesita evaluarlas para poder preparar una actividad de mañana, ¿sí? Nada, no robo más tiempo para que puedan, y agradecerle a ustedes el esfuerzo de estar presentes y de ir adelante. En otros momentos, a lo largo de estas 4 sesiones que nos va a compartir Jari, vamos a ir comentando y afinando cuestiones y dudas que puedan haber respecto del trabajo final, el ensayo o los resúmenes que eventualmente debieran preparar para acreditar, ¿sí? Así que Jari, es tu turno ahora, adelante y muchas gracias.
Buenos días. That's all I am able to speak in Spanish. So, good afternoon, everybody. Very happy to see you here. you all. Juan Carlos already introduced quite much, but I like to emphasize something before I start. So I have 4 presentations of 4 lectures, and they are examples of teacher education in secondary, primary level in Finland, how we educate science teachers. They are not the whole lectures, but somehow I have put things together and give examples. And I'm hoping that I am able to introduce something about the content, what we emphasize in initial teacher education, in the pedagogically oriented courses, and also a little bit how we aim to engage our student teachers in learning. So how we push them to discuss and analyze and brainstorm and negotiate and argue. So this twofold type of aims here. Examples and from the content and examples from the activities. The first lecture is focusing more like basic issues, constructivistic type of thinking and modeling inquiry. And the second talk is more about project-based learning, which is very important issue now in Finland, in Europe, in the United States, how to implement a new type of curriculum into action in the classroom. And then I introduce, because you are discussing about STEAM education, the A, art, humanistics orientation. So how to teach and learn science through reading and writing. That is the third. And finally, it's more question about integrating of transversal competencies to science education, which is also important in STEAM. That is in a nutshell what will come. So I just arrived from Finland, and I hope that you are also able to taste Finland. Finnish chocolate is quite famous. So please open it and take a piece of Finnish culture. On the other hand, you are having a very nice springtime here. I'm coming from the ugly autumn, raining every day and 6 hours light time. So it's a huge difference to your nice spring. So I'm very happy to be here. So time is limited, so let's start. And once again, they might be brand new issues to you. You should remember that, because you are specialists, you are teaching science teachers, the pedagogy, many other things. But this is the view how we are doing things. So, of course, I'm not telling to you that you should take this to your classroom and copy my ideas. That's never work. Our contexts are different and our styles are different, our students are different. But let's hope that we can learn from each other and discuss and make progress in our professional life. So my first activity is now starting. So I have taken 7 maybe not most important, but important ideas in my lecture. And I prepared so-called climb cards. They are simple climbs. And I ask you to negotiate in 4-person group. Do you agree or disagree with the claims? So the claim could be like this, that environmental issues are only science issues. So that is a claim. Do you agree or not agree? Disagree. And this activity is done in a 4-person group. 3 is also fine, 5 is also fine. It's not so important how many, but about 3 to 5. So you have those climb cards in your table. Juan Carlos is giving them. And then you sit down and you turn the climb card and read it aloud. And then you have to think a little bit, not answer directly, wait a little bit, think a little bit. And then maybe the chairperson of the group says that, let's answer now. if you fully agree with the claim, you put your hand or your name, you can make a lap of your name, but the hand is also fine. You put hand to the close to the claim. If you disagree, you put it out. In the situation everybody agree, it looks quite clear. If there is variation, maybe those who have the minority, maybe they have to raise why they think different way. Anyway, you have to negotiate what is your final kind of consensus agreement related to the claim. And you put those claim cards you agree to one pillar and those you disagree to other pillar. And then we discuss afterwards. So this is quite simple. This is one example of the cooperative learning exercises we are using in our speech education classrooms. In the reading and writing activity, I have another cooperative learning activity. So, the claims, so that you are not able to see them, turn one claim, read it carefully, make a personal opinion, and negotiate and make a group opinion. Claims you agree to one place, disagree to one place. Is this clear now? Good. And Juan Carlos, are you here? Do you have those cards? Not yet. Okay, Juan Carlos is making homework. So, it takes some 15 minutes. It's not a long process, and then we negotiate, discuss in a big group what is your common consensus understanding related to the claims. So let's go to the 3, 4, 5 person group now. You have to move. Maybe you go there, or maybe you can move here.
It's acá, one more pillar.
Okay,
Because he's here. Bueno, perfecto.
So what is the time?
At 4 at 8.
Coffee is about 7.
Yes.
Before 8. Yeah, before 8. But enough.
But we can.
No, I think it's
Break the of 15 minutes.
Yeah, they have to give up the phone. That's important. Because I think that I can demonstrate the way how we engage students.
Yes, sure. Feel free to show and to understand. That is a fact. Feel completely.
That's it.
And you tell me when you want to break. The break, coffee break is 15 to 20 minutes, so we can say coffee. Complete.
Let's look.
Right, you decide.
How long it takes.
Okay. They are very much engaged, so if they want to discuss, you can leave them. El profesor está deseando que finalicen, se nota que están discutiendo bastante, pero dice que tal vez se pueda volver sobre esto. Ahora la idea sería ir completando, simplemente cada grupo decir si acuerdan o desacuerdan. ¿Sí? So now we go group by group, saying whether they agree or not. So, para la escucho y olvido, miro y recuerdo, hago y comprendo, vamos a hacer la ronda sí.
Agree.
Agree.
Agree?
The next group,
¿Por qué no levantamos todos?
agree, ok. Sí, somos poquitos nomás. Agree and agree. Todos agree. Everybody agree. La segunda, manos a la obra, acuerdo o desacuerdo.
Disagree.
Desacuerdo,
De acuerdo.
desacuerdo,
No.
acuerdo. The second agree. Desacuerdo, desacuerdo. For disagree. La tercera, el aprendizaje de las ciencias es un proceso. El aprendizaje de las ciencias es un proceso. ¿Ustedes agree o no? El aprendizaje de las ciencias es un proceso y está influenciado por la cultura. Agree. Agree, agree, agree. La próxima, la enseñanza. En la enseñanza de las ciencias deberíamos poner énfasis en el proceso, más que en el conocimiento científico. ¿Agree? Just one answer. Una respuesta, dale.
Disagree.
Desacuerdo.
Agree.
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 Agree. Desacuerdo. En el conocimiento, no, perdón. El conocimiento y el proceso científico, cómo trabajar científicamente, pueden separarse y las habilidades del proceso son transferibles. Desacuerdo. Acuerdo. Desacuerdo. Acuerdo. La enseñanza de las ciencias basada en la investigación ayuda a los estudiantes a aprender conocimientos científicos, comprensión, métodos científicos, habilidades, la naturaleza de las ciencias y aumentar el interés por los estudios de ciencia. Agree. Acuerdo, acuerdo, acuerdo. Las clases de ciencias deben planificarse solo de acuerdo con los objetivos del plan de estudio.
Agree.
Desacuerdo, desacuerdo, desacuerdo. Ok.
Pues hagan lo que quieran.
So I hope that you can feel what your students might feel in this situation, and you can use these kind of cards in many purposes. We were discussing upstairs earlier about the socio-scientific issues, and this kind of starting point for that kind of issue might be good. So we don't go to the detail because we will get answers or we come to the kind of consensus understanding, let's hope so, during the lesson today. But there might be something interesting, for example, hands-on best. One agree, others disagree. Maybe there you agree. Can you give arguments why it is best?
Escucho y olvido.
Manos a la obra, trabajo de laboratorio es importante en las clases de ciencias. Acuerdo. Perdón, this group was the second.
Okay, yeah, please.
No hablamos inglés.
No importa, en español. En
¿No
español.
tenemos que usar el micrófono para el...
Sí.
Para que puedan
Sorry,
traducir.
because they are going to answer. Please come here.
But you can translate it. They speak in Spanish.
Yes, they speak in Spanish, but they need to use this. So, put your.
Quizás puedan sumar Lo que pensábamos era, digamos, que lo experiencial, digamos, el trabajo de laboratorio en el trabajo de ciencias nos parece muy importante para una clase de ciencias. Por eso nos parece que está de acuerdo. Absolutamente. Que estamos de acuerdo.
Y con lo primero, porque
Claro,
si uno
aparte
dice que tiene que hacer para aprender, la
Claro, cuando
verdad
justamente estamos de acuerdo en que hago y comprendo, entonces el manos a la obra es fundamental en el laboratorio, el trabajo de laboratorio para la enseñanza de las ciencias. Por eso nos parece, consideramos que estamos de acuerdo con ambas afirmaciones.
And maybe one group who disagree. So let's have and one group who disagree. Could you explain why you disagree?
Is this group? One group, hay uno, claro, uno de los que desacordó, si por favor puede explicar. Vas a tener que venir, es muy incómodo esto, no hay micrófono otra vez. No, no pueden traducir, sí.
Okay. Well, I'm an experimental researcher, so I should have agreed. But I disagreed because there's one word, which is most, and that was the word that made me disagree with the statement, because I think it's incredibly important, I think it's essential, but I don't think it's the most important part of teaching science.
Okay, thank you. So in my class, so those which was totally agree or disagree, everybody, I don't focus to them, but later on I will come back. And maybe I take a couple of examples in the situation where opinions were in both sides so that students can listen each others and why they argue this is the right, or why they argue this is true, why they argue this is not true. So this kind of negotiation. And then I promise that we come back during my lesson and then we got some evidence that maybe we can also have a clear educational research evidence that is it true or not. So this is the way how I activate students to follow and participate the lessons in my class. So quite often as science educators, we are somehow blaming the traditional teaching. So the traditional teaching is not supporting learning, not supporting engagement and that one. And what we mean with the traditional teaching, that's quite interesting. There's huge variation, of course. Maybe there is not a common agreement what is traditional teaching. But international literature, the transmission of knowledge, that is we are blaming, because everybody should somehow be active in the learning. Or following the cookbook type of lab manuals, recipes. Let's do just exactly as it is in guideline. On the other hand, we know that guidelines are important in situation, for example, in chemistry, where you have certain toxic substances in your class. So that is plain. There is also examples from Finnish textbooks here in my slides. This is a very traditional cookbook science exercise. There is exactly told what should be done. There is also the answers are ready, and so it's nothing to think about. And one issue what we are blaming is that in the textbooks, it's a very axiomatic type of writing. There is no phenomena. So it is just giving the ready theory to students. The matter around us is made of atoms, and matter containing only one type of atom is element. So one fact, second fact, somehow related to each other, but no phenomena, no possibility to understand actually anything. So that we are blaming. In the International Handbook of Learning Science, there is also a very nice description what we mean with traditional teaching. So it is a little bit strange I start with this kind of what is traditional teaching, but in this lesson I am aiming to give you solutions how to change traditional teaching, how to overcome the challenges in traditional teaching, what have done in the history of science education research, what was successful, what was not so successful. But it's a nice list of the handbook. So the students' content is not related to what students know about it, what kind of experiences they have. Then it's called traditional. Student-based subject they study individually, so without any interaction with other students and teachers. Unconnected pieces of information. Facts, we are given facts. We are not applying them immediately to the new situation. And so on. So maybe you can come back to this list later on, but there is also this kind of nice literature reviews, what are meant with the traditional teaching. In Finnish textbooks and in Finnish science education, we seriously try to raise the importance of phenomena. The phenomena is something that we are guiding students to make sense. We are aiming that students can recall what kind of experiences they have in the field of phenomena, what kind of conceptions they have in the field of the phenomena. And it's used all over, all domains of science, even in geography. So the phenomena is, you can see from the balloon, the landscape, and then you make the map. So in the textbooks and lessons, we aim to make sense of the phenomena. So it is very different to the traditional teaching blamed by the handbook. And also this use of knowledge in situation, that is important. In the same lesson, very closely, phenomena, sense making, and use of knowledge in different situations. So I promise that we are now soon looking for different kind of pedagogical approaches, how in history and now, how people are aiming to overcome the challenges in science education. But before I go to those examples, and especially what is working well with them, and where are the challenges, and maybe why they are not supportive for learning or engagement, I would like to share kind of common understanding of the basic concepts we are using. So what we mean learning in my lesson now. Of course, there are so many definitions with the learning, but it's good for you to know what I mean when I'm talking about learning. And what I mean with the pedagogical approaches, I'm using that term also a lot. And finally, what I mean with the interest or engagement. So what is learning? And this is coming from the Socratic and Cerniak book. It's about project-based learning, but they are discussing about learning. So in this context, and in this context of my presentation today, so the learning means that students are making sense of phenomena and experiences together with other students in order to construct a meaningful understanding. Meaning making is used to make meanings to the concepts or core ideas. That is the process. And in the learning, it's also the outcome is important. So both learning is process and learning is outcome. And what is the outcome? It's kind of coherent structure in the mind. The new ideas or new concepts are connected to each other and previous ideas or knowledge that allows students to use relationships, make predictions, solve problems, understand the world. So that is my meaning now to the learning in the science education context and the context of my presentation. And when we are discussing about learning of concepts or conceptual knowledge in more broad, of course we have to remember that there are conceptual knowledge type of issues and procedural knowledge type of issues. For example, electric circuit is a concept, and closed circuit and making of that is you need a procedural knowledge in order to make that. But that was a little bit step outside of the box, but anyway. And what I mean here now with the pedagogical approach is there are many terms used in the same way: teaching methods, instructional, pedagogical, model strategies or approaches, students' activity, classroom practice. So many terms are used, and sometimes I use them in a loose way. But what I mean with them, in a simple way, they are something that are happening in the classroom, and they have a strong goal orientation, or they are done according to the objectives of the curriculum, and there is social interaction in the classroom. So that is then called pedagogical approach. And in the context of science, of course, there is interaction with nature. Maybe that should be added. And the aim of the pedagogical approach is that we help students to learn new ideas, concepts, skills, competencies, values, attitudes. I'm not going too deep to the interest and motivation, but just to share common understanding. In quite many interest and motivation theories, there are kind of two types of interest or motivation. The individual interest is something very deep in our mind. We can have a strong interest to the football playing or walking in the nature. And the situational interest is something that we can wake up in the classroom in situation. And it can vary from situation to situation. And there are many ways how to support the development of situational interest. Choosing the content, it should be interesting, coherent, somehow new topics related to the previous one and that type of things. And the relevance from the personal, society, occupation, studies point of view. Task-based, it means that what kind of activities are around the concept, how much students have autonomy, how much they have feeling of competence and relatedness while they are working with the topic, and the context, in which kind of context they met it. And then knowledge-based, what is the prior knowledge they have, how much knowledge is available. So these three types of areas can influence the development of situational interest. Of course, there are quite complex models, typically two phases, catching the interest and holding it. First you should somehow wake it and then hold enough in order to support the learning activities. In motivation we have intrinsic motivation, very deep in our mind, and then kind of external motivation. So it's a little bit similar. So, and in a classroom, we are typically focusing to the situational or external motivational issues. So that was common. So something you would like to add or make a comment about learning, pedagogical approaches, interest and motivation. So then we are discussing about the same meaning with those terms. Anything to add? Juan Carlos, does it work with you?
Yes, it does work with me. ¿Alguna intervención, algún comentario sobre lo que plantea Yari? Personalmente creo, I personally think, Yari, that it's important to agree that there should be a kind of common understanding on these three main concepts you are starting with: learning, motivation, and pedagogical approach. I think that is a good strategy to set a common floor of understanding to start discussing. En este sentido, no sé si ustedes tienen algo que acotar o no. I personally would discuss or challenge this idea of from discovery learning to constructivism. I think that in principle there is a natural way of looking continuity from discovery to constructivism. However, constructivism as such has quite a complicated landing in our country in terms that it is a pedagogical discourse somehow associated to democratization during 70s and 80s in Latin America. And somehow extreme constructivism was taken as a way of relaxing the pedagogical asymmetry, the pedagogical responsibility between teacher and student, the differentiation of roles, and so. So I think that is something to be discussed. Probably in Finland has been different, but in Latin America very much the idea of constructivism coming from Piagetian ideas and by Vygotskian and neo-Vygotskian ideas later, in a later timeline, but they all together were very much extrapolated as psychological understanding of the active subject in the dimension of psychology into the pedagogical practices. And that was done through teacher training and in-service teacher training, asking the teachers, please forget about traditional learning, forget completely about that. If you want to be democratic and be in the frame of constructivist paradigm, you must move into, nobody explains exactly where, but you have to abandon traditional learning to move somewhere that we don't know. That's something I would comment on this. Perdón.
No, sí.
Please take your headphone, Yari, so she can...
Ahora sí. ¿Qué tal? Buenas tardes. Bueno, yo soy docente de alumnos de 6 años, 7, y tenemos que enseñar conocimiento del mundo. Entonces se me había ocurrido una actividad donde poder trabajar lo que es la ciencia con ellos, y habíamos visto el tema de los cuerpos opacos, translúcidos y transparentes. Entonces, esta me parece un poquito fuerte, ¿no? Ahí por se le tapa. Sí. ¿Ahora se escucha mejor? Ahora sí, porque veo como que se la copla. Entonces se me ocurrió jugar al cumpleaños, donde había que encontrar dentro de 4 bolsas de distinto tipo de tono o, digamos, tamaño, esconder un regalo, y habíamos dicho que había distintos personajes que eran ansiosos, otros que no querían saber lo que tenía adentro, otros que les daba lo mismo si había o no algo adentro. Entonces ellos iban explorando las bolsas. Después de eso se les dio la oportunidad de poner el regalo dentro de las bolsas para ver si realmente la elección de cada uno correspondía con la ansiedad, con el no interés por lo que había dentro, y jugaron con la observación. Entonces, en base a eso, ellos empezaban a ver qué se podía observar dependiendo del cuerpo, si era opaco, translúcido o transparente, con respecto a las bolsas. Y lograron encontrar ese sentido a lo que es en cuanto a la ciencia, la observación, la experimentación. Hasta intentaron en una bolsa de cartón usar una linterna para ver si podían ver el regalo adentro, y se dieron cuenta que no. O sea, a lo que quiero llegar es que con experiencias muy simples, tal vez con los más chiquititos, que es lo más difícil, logramos enseñar algo que es a veces para ellos es un poco más complicado. Pero bueno, eso es una experiencia que quería compartir de mi aula.
Do you prefer to answer first or go to the following question?
I'm not able to answer. I can make some comments, but let's listen to another one.
Okay.
Yo tengo una duda, muy interesante todo lo que usted explica, pero del seminario de hoy más temprano y de lo que estamos analizando ahora, yo a veces me confundo si estos análisis que usted presenta son que deberíamos aplicarlos en la enseñanza a los estudiantes, las escuelas secundarias o primarias, o si también deberíamos aplicarlo a la enseñanza de los futuros profesores o maestros de esos niños, esos jóvenes. Yo me confundo continuamente en esta universidad con todos estos análisis y el STEM y el STEAM y la enseñanza por proyectos. Si es que estamos hablando de quiénes son nuestros estudiantes, en quién estamos pensando, en los estudiantes que tienen hasta 18 años o en los estudiantes que son futuros profesores, futuros maestros de esos jóvenes.
So maybe I answer this.
Yeah, sure.
The second question is much more easy to answer, and maybe I can make comments to the first one. So, I am introducing the way how we educate secondary teachers in Finland. So these kind of lectures are given to the student teachers. They are, in this phase, they are typically third or fourth year students. They have taken the courses in the subject. They have taken also some basic courses in the educational psychology. So this is the kind of science teaching and learning for student teachers. In the secondary level, students aged about 13 to 19. So these ideas are used, what we are now learning here in the classroom, while teachers are thinking how to teach, how to support learning. Does it make sense?
So, this analysis is for how we teach to youngsters.
Yes, student teachers. Pre-service teachers. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, these are how we teach, how teachers are teaching students, but this is how we discuss in our teacher education. What are the challenges in teaching in a classroom?
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's not how we should teach future teachers. It's how we should teach.
Yes.
Yeah, something like that.
Sorry.
Yes or no?
Can I?
Yes, but the context are different. I mentioned in the beginning that the context are different. So what I am doing in Helsinki, maybe you are not able to do here. You have to make your creativity and transform the ideas to your context. So I'm not telling that this is the way how you should do it. This is the way quite close I am doing in secondary teacher education.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think that it was very, very important because the question he presented that probably it's a concern to himself, but also to everybody.
You know, that was important.
Is it when we talk about the STEAM? Is STEAM for teaching at the schooling within the schooling system in the first grade or preschool to secondary school, or is it for pre-service teacher training? Pre-service teacher training is understood as initial teacher training. This distinction is very clear, and your answer is both. I mean, there are no sharp distinctions. This is what I understood.
And I should add something. So this is a very lecture type of teaching. In addition, we have also group activities. So we are not having that here. it is very much hands-on with the lab equipments and doing things and communicating the outcomes, giving presentations in small groups. And then we have also teaching practice. Students go to the classrooms. And we have emphasized in teacher education that what we are doing in lectures, they are in line what's happening in the groups. And they are also in line what is happening in the training school. The teacher training, those who are mentoring the student teachers training, they are aware of those things. So there should be a coherence in line, the lectures, group activities, and practice. They should have a common language. That's why I introduced those, what I mean with learning and pedagogy and interest. So that mentoring teachers are aware of them. They know the terminology. They know the content. We have a lot of meetings, discuss about that, like we are doing now here. Similar questions are asked in Finland also. Your question was long and it was a little bit loud. It was difficult to hear everything, but I just introduced those issues in the context of science education, and students have had already classes in education psychology and other fields, so there are many views to learning, many views to the pedagogy. But what exactly was asked, that was not out of my hearing.
She was not asking, but rather sharing with us and the group her experience as a primary school teacher teaching sciences in an innovative way. So it was just...
Yeah, and that was not so innovative yet. We will continue in the learning science through reading and writing. That is innovative for science teachers, and then we discuss more about learning. So we make it a more broad concept. We come back. Okay, now let's go to discovery learning. So in Finland and in Europe, maybe it's not so political, and the constructivism was in Europe, especially northern part, a kind of new way of thinking, teaching, a kind of answer how to make traditional teaching more supportive for learning. But this discovery learning, that was very much emphasized in United States and United Kingdom. They made a lot of efforts in that. At the same time, the new math also was established. So everything happens after the Sputnik. In late 50s, 57, Soviet Union succeeded to have this Sputnik all around the world, and Western world got worried about science education, and they developed in United States, in MIT, and in United Kingdom, in Nuffield Foundation, new type of approaches, pedagogical approaches for teaching and learning science. And the main idea is that students learn science through experimenting, making experiments. That is important. And observations are independent of the previous knowledge. So we throw or guide students to around the phenomena and ask them to make sense of the phenomena, not guide them, not thinking what they are learning about the phenomena earlier, what kind of conceptions they have, what kind of experiences, just guide them around the phenomena. So hands-on best was the slogan in that approach. And they organized a lot of teachers in service training, a lot of pre-service training was organized according to the discovery learning. The idea was the students discover the concepts and natural laws themselves. And in those books published by Nuffield Foundation, they have this poem, I listen, I forgot, and I look and remember, I do, I understand. That was a slogan in discovery learning. And then the science education researchers in late 70s, 80s start to look what students really learn. And in United Kingdom, the Rosalind Driver was one of those who made very serious long-term research with a big research group, what students learn. And he introduced the poem in a different way. The last sentence, I do, and got confused. So she discovered that they actually learn in a wrong way or nothing, without the heavy teacher scaffolding. And the Driver published those famous books, Pupils as Scientists, and other books also, and he concluded, students are not able to create scientific concepts, students' learning could be supported through social interaction and through helping them to recognize their previous thoughts. And also the philosophers like Popper was very much against discovery learning and told about science is making progress through deductive thinking, not through inductive thinking. So that one of those blind parts, so in my opinion it's wrong. So it's not true, according to date. I have met Rosalind when she was living and read his books, her books and papers, and I very much trust that it's not working like that. And then Rosalind and many other researchers in Europe that time published books and papers related to the constructivistic style of learning and teaching. And I summarized, there are 4 important views in constructivism. And in Finland, it was not against discovery learning, it was more against traditional teaching. This way how we understand that teaching and learning should happen in our classrooms. So first, students' active role, and there are 2 levels. In situations, they should be active in making observation, measurements, experience, and that kind of things. And in a broad meaning, students should be more active in planning their learning actively, and also reflect, make self-assessment. In Finland, we take it so seriously that in our legislation is funny, that assessment should happen in the form of self-assessment in all levels of education, in student level, teacher level, school level, municipality level. It's very important that those who are organizing education, they are also themselves assessing education. So we went very deep in that idea. And it's still valid in our system. That is the first idea. Second idea is that perception is adaptive. So it is situational and depends on the activity and situation or the environment in which the observations are made. So the context influences the observations and learning. If you are teaching combustion or burning, and if you are showing that how the candela is burning, how the smudge are burning, students get a feeling that when the object is burning, it vanishes. Nothing exists after the burn. You have to burn also alcohol and collect the gases. You can see that water is coming out from the alcohol burning. You have to burn iron wall, and it comes heavier. So there must be many contexts available when we are teaching issues. And then the students' previous knowledge, conceptions, experiences, they influence observations and interpretation of and explanation of those. And then finally the social interaction. So in Finnish constructivism, you have the political. We emphasize these 4 issues. And in UK, US, this was against the discovery approach. In Finland, it was more against the traditional teaching. And then, of course, there are many practical hints how to organize constructivistic learning in your classroom. One is the phases. When you are planning to make some practical activities, there must be space for discussing before the activities. And of course, teachers guiding during the activities. What is your observation? Where is your evidence? What you claim? And then afterwards, there is discussion, what's coming out. So the hands-on best is maybe not the truth, brains-on, or both, hands-on and brains-on. And that should be supported. And the classroom interaction, it's not giving recipes or guidelines or ready answers, it's prompting what you mean and that kind of things. And then we in our textbooks now we have a lot of these kind of tests which are used for recognizing the students' perceptions and misconceptions. And in our teachers' manuals, there are a lot of information how students have difficulties in learning a specific topic. So on. And of course in international books you can find a lot where those issues are discussed nowadays. In the days of some 20 years ago, of course we were also very active in making research on conceptions and conceptual understanding. One project was we were looking for teachers, secondary teachers, how secondary teachers understand the Newtonian mechanics, the force and action and those basic issues. And then we were looking some 15 secondary teachers, and then we will measure their understanding, and then we use interview for teachers, and then we measure the student understanding, those same teachers, students' understanding. And it was quite clear that those teachers who had very solid understanding about Newtonian mechanics and conceptions were according to the mechanics, their students were very good. But those teachers who have fragmented style of understanding of the Newtonian mechanics, these students have also very bad understanding. So that kind of research we made those times. Would you like to raise some political or something else
No.
about the constructivism?
No, yo solamente hice una contextualización porque el modo en que I will do it in English because I want Yaki to listen, not you. I made that focus on constructivism because it is quite a discussion nowadays within pedagogical thinkings and pedagogical interpretations in our country. What was the effect of applying a constructivist pedagogical perspective, and what is in teacher training, and in all senses in service teacher training, pre-service teacher training. But also because I know that in Finland the idea of constructivism came much later than here. It was just there at 90s, where seriously at the level of policy making, everybody started to talk about constructivism seriously. Before it was just something there. I mean, it wasn't brought into the pedagogical field as it was brought here. And so I wanted to make that point. And I think that in terms still today, there are concepts that must be very much discussed. You are talking continuously about the idea when talking about discovery or investigative learning or discovering learning or whatever you want to name it. The point always is an active subject or active learning subject. And that's it, just a psychological dimension category, on my view. How you describe that category in the field of educational practices, there is a bridge to be built up. in that sense, and that's something that is missing. And that's something that I would point out regarding constructivism as an epistemological position of understanding how knowledge is built up or is produced or is constituted. But at the level of educational practices, I think that still is a question mark. And so the interpretation and the way you present your examples, I think that they are an answer, a way of answering to this. But this question of mixing up the psychological dimension with the epistemological interpretation of how knowledge is produced or constituted is very much among us. That's my understanding.
So I have collected some learning material we use in our teacher education related to this topic. So, but would you like to say something, or we can have 15 minutes before the coffee break? I can make some other topics.
Yes.
Maybe I go further.
I think it's time, Yari.
No, let's take this one, and then we can have a break. Yeah. So the social constructivism is also important in teacher education, and the role of interaction in learning. And when we were working with Juan Carlos in Peru some more than 10 years ago, we discussed a lot about Peruvian in Catholic University, what they emphasize in teacher education, and they emphasize Vygotskian thinking. But then I understand that they use a lot of lessons only to Vygotsky. Going through in detail everything, I use maybe 7 minutes for Vygotsky. And then I start to apply. So this, in teacher education, this use of knowledge, apply knowledge in situations where you are working, where your students should work. That's important. Not in deep, because they are not graduating, they are not coming researchers in the Vygotskian thinking. They are coming teachers. So what I am teaching about Vygotsky. So of course I saw the picture and asked my students that this is the person that is most cited in science education research. Absolutely the biggest number of citations. So who might he be? Nobody typically knows either the Vygotsky. What he has been, what kind of research he has been making in science education? Nothing. So he has making very general research about the role of language and the role of culture and many things related to that. Also the proximal zone and that kind of things. But in a nutshell, I think that's enough. In a nutshell. So the Vygotsky make research on the influence of the culture, looking for young people in Switzerland, in Russia, how the culture influenced the development of language and inner thought. And in science education research, we think that the science lab is a kind of culture that is influencing the talk and thinking and learning. So our conceptions are constructed and links are made and in the influence of the science lab. So, and what about this social interaction? So why we push students to the discussion? On the left-hand side, there is one student who has those 3 ideas. On the right-hand side, there is a student with 3 ideas, but different ideas. They are negotiating, discussing, and that's the way how they link things together. They learn from each other through discussion. So I think these are for my students, I hope, enough the Vygotskian message to science teachers, what they should emphasize in the classroom. So, learning as a social process, the two dimensions in talk, the natural talk, inner talk, and this zone of proximal development, you are somewhere where you are not yet able to do what you should do according to the curriculum, but this help from other person helps you to overcome the proximal zone. So that's all. I'm not sure how you like it, but I think the Peruvian friends do not like.
Yes.
Yes, that comes very clear. And then we use these ideas in our discussions and also in our research. For example, we analyze classroom discussion. Not only student-student interaction, but teacher-student interaction. This is also very much in the frame of the Vygotskian thinking. So this is from the classroom, actually first model. So from the science education point of view, you can analyze the interaction in a classroom in 2 dimensions. The one dimension is interactive, non-interactive. Now it is not very interactive, it's non-interactive, I'm talking, it's a lecture. During your group work, it was very interactive. Maybe you were focusing to the scientific views, but also to your previous knowledge and previous experiences. So the other dimension here is the focus on science and somehow open to different point of views and the conceptions and experiences. So we analyze the discussion in the classroom in this 2-dimensional framework. And this is an example. Teacher, do you remember last hour, electric bell? Students, yes? Okay, did anyone notice? Did anyone pay attention to the clock? What did you notice? Vibrations. Okay, the language vibrate, not the language, but it's my translation. So it's not a language, it's a kind of
Sound.
Yeah, that was vibrating. So yes. What else did you notice? The sound was loud. This was exactly what I was looking for. So the discussion is quite monotonous. There is 3 phases all the time. It's a kind of teacher initiative, a question, student response, and teacher evaluation. Initiative, response, evaluation. Initiative, response, evaluation. It is interactive, but it is not constructive. Teacher is not interested about students' conceptions. He's not able to somehow catch them and start to discuss about them. So I think the Vygotskian message is that we are not looking for that kind of interaction. We are looking for kind of probing and monitoring what people are thinking. And I give another example from the Finnish. So this is called initiative response evaluation type of interaction. And it's here. It is interactive, but we are very much focusing to science. This is from the Finnish classroom, from the secondary classroom. And so you can see what happened, but you don't understand because it is Finnish. But I have a translation. So let's have a look how it looks when it happens in the classroom. And it is very interactive, teacher-student interaction. And let's have a look what really happened in the interaction. So this is how it looks.
Miksi sanot, että se olisi tasaista? Miten tästä näkyy se, että se voisi olla tasaista sun perusteella? Se on tasaista ja johtavasti ehkä näkyy.
Niiden välillä voi siirtää suora piilo. Tai siis ne kaikki osuu suoralle piilolle.
Joo. Onko teillä käsitystä tai arvausta tietoa siitä, että mitä liikkeen ominaisuutta toi suoraan nyrkytyskuvaan? Osaatteko sen mahdollisesti arvata? Onko täällä teillä kiinni? jo reippaasti koulussa.
So it is that length of period in a lesson, and it looks like this. So teacher, based on the graph, what would the movement look like? Student, rather constant. Why do you say constant? How it shows? In what way does it show up here? You can draw a straight line between them, yeah? Do you have any idea what characteristics of motion the direct steepness describes? Student acceleration, teacher, Did Eira have acceleration when she was walking? No. Okay. Did you mean speed? The speed would be associated from this figure. So this is another style of interaction, and why? So there is initiative, response, evaluation as in previous, but there is also kind of prompting. Teacher is prompting. How it shows here, he's not satisfied yet. Response, prompt, initiative, prompt, initiative. So teachers are really interested about students' ideas and supporting the meaning making to the phenomena they are investigating. So this kind of activities we are having in our teacher education, and so in a lecture I introduce these topics in general, and in the group work we can analyze more deeply the video clips from the classrooms and think how the teacher is supporting the students' learning through this kind of interaction. On the other hand, we should always remember that when we are looking these two dimensions, interactive, non-interactive, and focus to science, focus to students' conceptions, we need both. I'm not telling you that only this kind of prompting is needed and that kind of. So sometimes we have to go quite straightforward. So I try to emphasize in my education that there is no right approach, so we have to combine. But we have to know what we can get with a certain type of approach. So this is the good place for having the coffee. But is there something that you would like to add or make comment? So that was about the constructivism in general, and then social constructivism, student discussion and teacher-student discussion, lot of activities, analyzing the videos. And it is also, because our teacher education is research-oriented activity, so student teachers are making master theses in science education. And this is one example. They can analyze the interaction in the classroom. So typically the data for the master thesis are coming from the classrooms, what's happening in the classrooms. We try to understand deeply what's going on there. Our publications are very much also coming from the classroom research.
Excellent.
Oh.
Creo que es tiempo de un cafecito, una agüita, un algo. Cortamos un ratito y si fuera posible, cortamos 15 minutos, ¿sí? Que descanse el diario también. Habría que poder completar el formulario, ese si fuera posible que quede, que lo puedan completar antes de finalizar, porque él necesita verlo antes de dormirse. Sí.
¿Dormirse acá o
No sé, vemos. I was just saying.
You can take coffee and answer.
Yes, here, just outside.
You can say you can take coffee and answer.
Well, Yari is proposing, if you, Yari está proponiendo, si ustedes quieren, tomar café y se responde.
claim. We start with the claim cards. So all of you agree. I listen, I forgot, and we were already discussing about that hands-on best. But you see that they are, in a way, claims that are not so easy to catch, and there are so many point of views. But that is the point. They push people to think and discuss, and everybody agree about this Vygotskian way of thinking. So, science process skills. In the 80s, in US, in UK especially, science education researchers and education policymakers start thinking that the content of the science is so huge, and all the time new content is coming, and the internet was also coming in that time, or of course close to the 90s, but anyway, technology information was available so easily. So where we should focus in our classrooms, to the knowledge or to the processes, how to work with the knowledge. And for that situation, the researchers developed so-called process approach or content-free science approach, and maybe the inquiry-based science education belongs to the same family. So the process is more interesting than the product. Knowledge and process can be separated. If you practice classifying and observations in certain content, then you can do it in another content. Methods for knowledge creation are common and transferable. When you master the method, you learn anything. Each process could be evaluated separately. So that kind of discussion was heavily done in 80s, late 80s, beginning of 90s. And new type of learning materials were developed, and new type of teacher education was developed. And this is an example of the material from United Kingdom, where the whole science book was focusing to the learning of science processes. How to collect data, how to analyze data, how to plan an investigation. And in the book, end of the book, the authors emphasize that the process is more important than the product as such. And in the United States, in the context of science, inquiry-based science education, very similar textbooks was found that they emphasize the making measurements, looking for how variables and how correlations, and also make the terms in the measurements. So several measurements are needed in order to be sure that that is an outcome of the measurements. And Philip Eadie and Robert Yates from UK, they developed quite well-known thinking science learning material for science education, and it was full that kind of exercises where students were trained to make analysis of the data in the graph mode, in the table, in this kind of pictures, and make this kind of evidence-based conclusions. Actually, what PISA measurement is measuring quite much this kind of competencies, how well students are able to make evidence-based conclusions. So the whole material was built on that. And the 6 science process skills were emphasized in that time. So these are the process skills we have to teach and learn at science education class. How to make observations and how to communicate the observation. And classifying is important. I have some slides about classifying things. Inferring, so how to make road from the observation to the conclusion, measuring and predicting. Observations, so in everyday life, so we make all the time observation, but in a science class and in science, real science, it's more rigorous and more serious. So observations are used for generic explanation and theories and so on. And you can practice your observation skills. There is an object I'm asking you to make observations and what you observe. So it's very open now, but maybe I can guide a little bit. Maybe I ask you to think about the properties of the matter. So maybe that is a good point of view of making observations, either in a very open or more guided. So that kind of things could be done if you are focusing to the properties of the material. So there are 4 different plastics and 2 metals in the pen and so on. We made also, our research group, we made a research on late 90s about observations, and we were interested about student teachers' observation skills, what they observe and how they interpret observations, and publish in Ordinate Journal our study. In a nutshell, we recognize that university students who are learning in a primary teacher education program, science, so the observation is very complex. So here on the bottom side, so first the observations, they are processed in working memory, and then we should remember the limitations of the working memory and how we can guide a human being to work with a small amount of information in the working memory in order to create new knowledge you can integrate to your long-term memory. And what you have in long-term memory, it is influencing your observations. So the observations and memory are nicely connected. But then, of course, the interest is influencing what you observe. It is influencing how you work with the observations. And also social interaction is influencing that. There is a theory called variation theory, which is related to the observation. And the message that is coming from the variation theory is that you should somehow make observation from the same topic in different situations in order to see the different point of view to the object you are making observation. And then you are using senses or tools in observations, and you need skills, those process skills in observations and so on. So it's a complex phenomenon, and the observation, and for student teachers, we should teach how to make observation in order to help them to teach in a classroom how students can make observations. And it's also a lot of messages to the demonstrations, why we should have only few equipments on the table, the limitation of the working memory, and that kind of things are coming out from this type of research on observations. And also the textbooks, we have to help students to focus to the topic we are willing them to focus on. And this is the variation that if the topic of the lesson is electric power, so it's very useful to have 2 lamps with different power, and then to develop the understanding what is the meaning of the power. So the variation with the objects. And here is a kind of list I go through with my students about teaching and learning to make observations. But I think that it's a little bit limited time here, and you can come back if you are interested about this, and if you are willing to integrate that type of things to your science class, it's up to you. And another science process skills important is classification. Classification is very natural for human being. My daughter has a baby. The baby is now 4 months old, and I can easily see how she is making classifications. So she's learning even now, 4-month-old, things through the classifying things. In science, it's actually very much classifying. We are classifying the physics areas, mechanics, thermodynamics. In chemistry, we are classifying from different point of view substances. The biology is full of classification. So why not use the classification more actively as a teaching method or pedagogical approach? Because it's natural for human and natural for science. This example is from biology, but I give only one example, or maybe a couple of examples. But how powerful is classification for making meaning to the concept? And now I am introducing how to become familiar with the concept insect through the classification. So I give examples. These all are insects, and none of them are insects. So actually the learning of concept is quite much classifying objects. And you are classifying objects, they belong to the domain of the concept, and others do not belong to the domain of the concept. And then of course you are constructing the definition. So what makes insects of them and why they are not. And then I ask you to apply your preliminary idea. So what of them might be insects and why? So this formation or meaning making of concept from classification, it quite often happens that we are making some kind of preliminary understanding and then we are trying it and then we come to the final definition. And of course the teacher is needed, okay, the insect, or maybe the student even can, with the support of teachers, tell that there are 3 domains in the body and there are 3 pairs of legs and that kind of things are characterizing the insect. And in our textbooks, these examples, non-examples are very important because they are the way how we support meaning making for concepts. The constructs and springs and that kind of things. But even actually in all science fields, you can easily think that you can starting from the phenomena around us and then classify things and make sense of the phenomena and come to the concepts you can use to describe, use to solve problems. So they are classifying type of activities. And now we come again to this evaluation. So this process approach looks nice, and it is nice. A lot of issues could be used for supporting learning, meaning making. However, in a big picture, A.D. Sayer and Yates made a very large study how this material they developed, thinking science, how supportive it was for learning those, let's say, like generic science process skills. Yes, in some level you can learn them and you can use in new situations, but basically the skills are very situational. They are not easily transformed from other context to another. Learning of new things depends from previous knowledge and knowledge structures. And the content and the process are inseparable, so it's not possible to separate them. Always you are teaching science, they are both present and you focus with them both. So that was coming out. In science education we should put emphasis on process, to agree, to disagree. Yes, we should emphasize, but not only process, also the conceptual side. So this inquiry-based science education, it is kind of continuum to the process approach. And the simple idea is it's coming more from the epistemology point of view. So guide students to work as a scientists in a classroom, following the scientific practices. So according to this inquiry-based science education approach, in science classroom, students study phenomena in order to learn knowledge, scientific method, nature of science, how scientists work. And I was planning that we can take a look for the video, but I think that we are not able to do everything. You can take a look at the video later, and maybe we can just chat. If you discuss with your neighbors, what are characteristics in scientific inquiry in a science class? What happens if teacher is willing to organize inquiry-based learning in science class? So if you chat first in a group, and if you give me 3 characteristics, what is important then? And later on you can take a look for the video. But now discuss.
Okay.
And then we listen to you. What are characteristics of inquiry?
Hola. Bueno, estamos para seguir. Nos quedan pocos minutitos ya para terminar y dejarlo ayer irse a dormir un poco. Comer algo, calculo. Vamos, me pidió que ustedes digan y que yo les traduzca las 3 características. Empezamos por allá. Dale.
Habíamos hecho la observación.
Sí. No escucho nada. Dale. Sí. Observación, observation, hypothesis, and experiment. Hypothesis.
Go on.
Observación, hypothesis, experiment. Este grupo.
Observation.
Observation.
Como definición del problema, ¿no?
Hypothesis
Y el método.
and method. Método, method,
Scientific method.
hypothesis and observation.
Scientific method to solve the equation.
Scientific method. Acá. ¿Cuáles serían? Digan.
Rigurosidad.
Rigorosity.
Sorry?
Rigorosity.
Curiosity.
No. How do you translate this? Rigorosity. Rigorosity. Yeah. It is, very systematic and scientific. Yeah, rigorous. Yeah. ¿Qué más?
Que sea verificable.
To be possible to be verified.
Verifiable.
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 ¿Y el otro?
Método científico.
Y scientific method. Bien, pero ustedes habían agregado una que era...
Revisión por pares, sí.
Perdón.
Revisión por pares.
Discusión.
Peer review.
Peer review. Peer review. ¿Y ustedes?
No, nosotros, más allá de pensar en estas cosas, nos habíamos detenido en otras cuestiones que tienen que ver con ese modelo y ese proceso de cómo conducir estos procesos, ¿no?
They didn't do the task you asked. Unfortunately, they decided to discuss around. So,
Yeah.
okay, come here and explain what you have discussed.
Nos detuvimos en el tipo de preguntas
They focused on the kind of questions
del docente hacia ese grupo.
from the teacher towards the group of students. What else?
De cómo se va sumando información parcial en lo que va sucediendo.
How partial information, pieces of information are brought together.
Y cómo también se vuelve necesario pensar que eso no es extrapolable a otros contextos, a otras
And
comunidades, a otros escenarios.
It becomes necessary to understand that is not it's possible to extrapolate to other contexts. That is just for that particular specific.
Tenemos un filósofo.
So that means you apply your knowledge.
Applied knowledge.
What happened? Something happened.
Cuando habla de rigurosidad, por ejemplo, decir accuracy.
Accuracy, you're right. Yes. Gracias, pero se puso de esta manera porque me lo pidió así de golpe, qué sé yo. Y se ve que no le gusta usar los cosos. Los cosos, sí.
¿Cómo se traduce?
Airheads.
This is all, no? Are you happy?
Yes. Please, now take the microphone.
So I try to follow what Juan Carlos told, what you were telling us. So this kind of consensus understanding, what characterize inquiry in a classroom. So this kind of things happen in a classroom when we are saying that students are now engaging in inquiry type of learning. So the hypotheses or questions, they are important in science also. And then according to the hypotheses or questions, students make observations, plan experiment, verifying, and be accurate in measurements. Or more general, use scientific method in a systematic way, and maybe apply the knowledge. And then something that was not so epistemologically science, so students in a small group and put information pieces together and peer review. That's, I can easily agree, and nothing serious to add. So that kind of things happen in the classroom. But this inquiry-based science education have been researched a lot. If you look those papers, there are many definitions for inquiry-based science education. And for example, Anderson, in the handbook for science education research, one of them, he made a summary. What is absolute common for all papers that are mentioning inquiry? There are only two things. So students are doing something together, and somehow they have an aim they're doing. It's quite broad. But then, when he looked more about what is not so deeply common, but somehow what characterizes the pedagogy. The driving question. It is not a question students are asked, because in inquiry we are guiding students to formulate a question they are looking at answer. But before that, in a classroom, there is something else. Somehow they become familiar with the context, and then teacher is telling that, let's have a look for that phenomena. Let's have a look for that, a driving question. Let's have a look for why sometimes objects comes down at the same time, sometimes different time, even they are put falling from the same height. Something like this, driving the next 2-3 lessons. Students' active role in planning. And then from the epistemology point of view, somehow authentic processes like making observation and collecting data, analyzing the data and coming to the model. Social interaction. And also about holistic goals. Some of you raised the question about holistic. So in inquiry there are not only aims related to the science, but also transversal competence goals. Learn to collaborate, learn to be critical, learn to be creative, that kind of things. So, but it's very challenging to go now to the classroom and plan a lesson according to this. But in a lecture like this, we can come to this kind of common understanding. But then we need some practices where students are planning how to guide students to the inquiry activity. But we are not having that activity. Let's take one example. The research question is important in real research, but also in student inquiry. How you guide students to plan research question, and what is a good research question? What kind of research questions are relevant for science lesson? Have you thought about this with your students? What is a good research question for 9th grade classroom? And how you guide students to find the question? Because in inquiry it is important that students are active in formulating the research question. They are looking on answer. It's not possible to ad hoc. This is my question. It's not a good typically. But how to do that? These are the questions we are doing in a small group activity more. You have an answer? Maybe you can translate somebody.
No, they are putting your point, sure. They are, it's late, Jari.
I can tell you that in Helsinki we have had a lot of in-service training for teachers for project learning and inquiry-based learning. And this is the most challenging for Finnish science teachers, how to guide students in their own classroom to formulate the question you can make a research activity. Yes, you, please.
I think that one should induce the students to ask questions about a problem related to fundamental aspects of science, not details, but the most fundamental aspects. And for that you have to twist their arms. So it's not just a free question activity. You have to force them to look in some direction. So you have to trick them. It's not so, it's a little bit dishonest.
Yeah.
It's not just ask whatever you want. Just, no, my friend, ask around this area, because if you go to somewhere else, maybe you are going to misuse your time. That's what I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the teacher's role in scaffolding and guiding is important. What is a good research question? What is the area of the table? Is that a good question for making inquiry?
It depends on the level. Maybe to start at a low level, maybe it's a good practical question.
Yeah. But somehow we typically, with Finnish teachers, we are aiming to have a question that is somehow guiding students to look correlations on how something is depending from something else. So that kind of questions. Or related to the properties, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
So, but it is challenging. Like tomorrow, I give an example how we do with Finnish teachers, so I will not answer myself, but yes, this is very challenging for teachers in Finland. And also for teacher educators, us, how to prepare student teachers to guide their students in the classroom to do that kind of activity. Of course, we can ask why it is so important. Our curriculum is emphasizing that in science, one of the most important aim is that you are learning to ask questions and looking for information according to the questions. In the PISA, we have been discussing about the PISA, almost 1/3 of the questions are somehow related to the research questions. There could be, for example, what might be the good keywords in the shares from the internet when you are this type of problem. So there are many questions are related to that kind of skill.
Yo le pido que me traduzca ella, más fácil.
Sí.
Vuelvo a decir, alumnos de 6 años. Una pregunta que se nos dio fue por qué la sopa no podemos usar un tenedor.
No, porque escuchamos todos.
Well, sorry. No. Sorry.
¿Es lo mismo? Porque no usa.
Esto está en streaming, así que
Ok.
necesitamos seguir las reglas. Voy a hacer abajo.
She's a grade teacher, a grammar school teacher, and
¿Por qué
The question she asked
usamos
is,
cuchara para tomar la sopa y no un tenedor?
why do we use spoons to eat soup and not a fork? And
La idea es poder trabajar con las propiedades del agua.
but the idea was to work with the properties of liquids, and water, viscosity, and that was the question she posed to be able to refer to these questions, to these issues.
So very holistic
Very holistic.
background aims in that kind of question.
Esa es la pregunta que podía usar yo en un aula, por ejemplo.
It's the type of questions she can use in her classroom with little children. Second grade?
6 años.
They're 6 years old. Second grade, first grade.
Good. Thank you. So now we have some good understanding of the asking of. We have a good understanding related to the asking of questions and how challenging it is to guide students to ask questions. We should take into account the level, and we can take those holistic aims in our processes. And tomorrow I will show you how we decided with Finnish teachers to guide, how we can guide students in asking questions. So this inquiry has been emphasized a lot in education policy. European Union, for example, give, I don't know, but hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to the development of inquiry-based science education in European context. A lot of money, big money, because first the politicians thought that inquiry-based science education is somehow giving better realistic picture of the science, real science, and it gives the better image of the science occupations and careers, and students become more interested about science and science careers. And also they thought that it's supportive for learning. And many researchers were supporting this idea, and that's why the money was given. But then afterwards, for example, this Potvin and Hasni, they made a big review, research, what we really know about how supportive inquiry is for interest, and interest related to the careers also. And they find very little evidence that it is supportive than something else, or supportive as such. So politicians become quite disappointed in Europe, and they stop financing that type of project. They have now new type of projects. So inquiry is important, but it's not solving the problems, unfortunately, what the politicians were willing to solve in that. And my last topic, 4 minutes, I can only start, and then I tell you that you can look the rest from the slides. But models and modeling, it has been a huge area in science education research, and I give you just a kind of introduction to one view, so that what is the role of models in science education? And I start with this kind of question to you. I have been emphasizing the phenomena and making sense of the phenomena. And while we are making sense of the phenomena, we come to the new concepts and models which are describing the phenomena. Okay, we know, everybody knows that Earth is rotating. That's clear for us. But what is the phenomena? And what are the steps while we are making sense of the phenomena when we come to this model that Earth is rotating? Give me the phenomena and how to make sense of that. So we are almost like in a situation where our students or students in the Argentina classrooms are. Teacher is teaching and But what is the phenomena and how to make sense of that? Yeah, sorry.
The day and the night.
Yeah, change of the day and yeah. But of course, other explanation could also be given for that. The sun is going around the sun, us. So I think that's a good example that we have a model and we are using it while we are making sense of the phenomena. So they are at the same time in our mind. Is there other, because yes, of course it's a phenomena, but I can have a different model and it is explaining the phenomena as well as your real phenomena, real model. Is there any other phenomena we can use and come to the real model that Earth is rotating, not the sun is going around?
God is playing with the globe.
Globe.
Just joking. Just
Okay.
It could be also a model of explaining.
What phenomena?
No, the rotation of Earth.
So this one, but it's very complex. So we are saying that this Foucault pendulum is explaining that. We are saying that. But it's a very long distance from the phenomena to the model. Of course, how it is explaining. So it is when the pendulum is moving, so it is changing the plane where it is oscillating. But of course you have to know that the pendulum has a phenomena that it is saving the plane where is happening the phenomena. So the only correct answer is that, okay, the pendulum is going in the same way, but the Earth, under that, it is turning. Very complex. And of course some photographing might be, it's almost the same, but of course you can say that the stars are moving, but how it is possible that they are moving with different velocity and a very symmetric way and so on. But anyway, the challenge is that phenomena, observation and knowledge. So that it is how it is not happening. I hope that this previous example somehow help you to understand now what I am telling you, how it is happening. And behind is a gears model, and so the phenomena, observation, and we get data. So we get the data about the phenomena. And then we have in our mind, we have some model. It could be real model or historical model or totally wrong, scientifically wrong model. Our conception. We are reasoning and we are prediction. And then we are looking how well the data and prediction are working together. And this looking is giving us negative or positive support, and then we can decide is the model right or wrong. So if you now go back to the previous example and you think, so actually that is how it was happening. We were not going from the phenomena to the concept or model, but it was more complex. This is one issue we use quite a lot of time. And also the other argumentation model, the Tolumni model, how Tolumni is guiding us to support the learning of the scientific argumentation in the classroom. So that we are using in argumentation, we are using the kind of evidence, observations, data, but also the previous knowledge, putting them together and then we are claiming. So our time is now out, but
yes, please.
But you can go back to my slides. I hope that this engages you somehow to think about the process related to the observation and experimentation, and also the use of models and comparing and that kind of things. And there is a lot of material available about that. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Gary. Cortamos acá y nos vemos mañana entonces. Los esperamos que descansen.
Mañana es hasta las 19 hasta las 20, porque yo pobre los compliqué la vida.
¿Cómo está?
Hasta las 20.
¿Cómo está la agenda?
Hasta las 19.
Está la